consciousness came before matter. I know this sounds absurd. I know it seems to contradict everything science has taught us, that matter came first, then brains evolved, then consciousness emerged as a late byproduct of material complexity. But what if we have it backwards? What if consciousness is not an accident of matter, but matter is what consciousness looks like from the outside? This is not mysticism. This is where the mathematics of quantum mechanics leads us, if we follow it honestly, if we take seriously what it tells us about the relationship between observation and reality. My name is Roger Penrose, and I've spent my life working at the boundary between physics and consciousness, trying to understand the measurement problem in quantum mechanics, trying to explain why observation seems to play a fundamental role in making reality definite. And what I've come to believe is radical. Consciousness is not emergent from matter. It's fundamental. It's woven into the fabric of physics itself, at the level where quantum superpositions collapse into definite states. And if that's true, then the standard story, matter first, consciousness later, is backwards. Let me start with a problem, because until you see the problem, you won't understand why this radical solution is necessary. The problem is called the hard problem of consciousness, named by philosopher David Chalmers. It goes like this. Why does physical matter give rise to subjective experience? Why is there something it's like to see red, to feel pain, to taste chocolate? We can describe the neural correlates, which brain regions activate, which neurotransmitters fire. We can build increasingly detailed maps of the physical processes, but none of that explains why there's an inner experience, why there's a what it is likeness, why consciousness exists at all. This is not a problem about information processing. We can imagine a system that processes information perfectly, recognizing faces, solving problems, responding appropriately without any inner experience, a philosophical zombie as they're called, behaviorally identical to a conscious person, but with no one home, no inner life. And here's the thing, physics, as we currently understand it, doesn't rule out zombies. You can write down all the equations governing neurons, all the laws of chemistry and electricity, and nowhere in those equations does consciousness appear. It's not predicted, it's not required, it's just there, mysteriously, and we have no idea why. The standard materialist answer is that consciousness emerges from complexity. Get enough neurons connected in the right ways, and consciousness just happens. But this is not an explanation, it's a label for our ignorance. Emergence is fine for explaining how wetness emerges from H2O molecules, or how hurricanes emerge from atmospheric dynamics. Those are cases where the higher level phenomenon is nothing over and above the lower level components organized in a particular way. But consciousness is different. Consciousness is not a pattern or a function. It's an intrinsic quality of experience. And no amount of complexity explains why complexity should feel like something. Some philosophers and neuroscientists bite the bullet and say consciousness is an illusion. There's no real inner experience, they claim. There's just information processing that creates the illusion of inner experience. But this is incoherent. An illusion requires someone to be fooled. If consciousness is an illusion, who's being fooled? The moment you say, I seem to be conscious, you're acknowledging consciousness. You can't coherently deny that you have experiences. That's the one thing you know directly. Descartes was right about this cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Consciousness is the only thing we know with absolute certainty. So materialism fails to explain consciousness. It either denies the phenomenon we're trying to explain, or it hand-waves with emergence, or it simply admits defeat and says consciousness is an inexplicable miracle that somehow happens when you organize matter in the right way. None of these are satisfying, and that's why I think we need a different approach. Not dualism, I'm not proposing a non-physical soul that violates physics, but something more subtle, something that recognizes consciousness as fundamental rather than emergent. Here's the key insight, and it comes from quantum mechanics. Observation plays a role in making reality definite. Before you measure a quantum system, it exists in a superposition of multiple states. The electron doesn't have a definite position, it's in many places at once. But when you measure it, the superposition collapses. It becomes definite. Now, the standard Copenhagen interpretation says measurement causes collapse. But what is measurement? And why does it have this special power? If measurement requires consciousness, if only a conscious observer can collapse a wave function, then consciousness becomes necessary for definite reality, This is sometimes called the consciousness causes collapse interpretation, and it's been around since the early days of quantum mechanics. Von Neumann explored it, Wigner advocated it, but it has problems. It seems to make consciousness magical, some non-physical entity reaching into the quantum realm and forcing collapse. And it leads to absurdities like, did the universe exist before conscious observers evolved? Was everything in superposition for 13 billion years until brains appeared? That's not what I'm proposing. I'm proposing something more subtle, grounded in my theory of objective reduction. The collapse is real and physical. It's caused by gravity, specifically by the gravitational self-energy of superpositions. When a particle is in two places at once, it's warping space-time in incompatible ways, and when the energy difference exceeds a threshold, the superposition becomes unstable and collapses. This is objective. It happens whether anyone is watching or not. But here's the crucial addition. The moment of collapse is accompanied by a moment of proto-consciousness, not full human consciousness. That requires enormous complexity, but something, a micro-experience, a tiny fleeting what-it-is-likeness. Wherever collapse happens, there's a glimmer of experience, and in complex systems like brains, where billions of coordinated collapses occur in orchestrated patterns, those micro-experiences integrate into full consciousness. This is not panpsychism in the naive sense. I'm not saying electrons think or rocks have feelings. I'm saying the building blocks of consciousness are present wherever quantum collapse occurs. Just as space-time curvature is present wherever mass exists, proto-experience is present wherever collapse occurs. And just as you need enormous concentrations of mass to create noticeable space-time curvature, like black holes, you need enormous orchestrations of collapse to create noticeable consciousness, like brains. Now, why does this mean consciousness came before matter? Because if proto-consciousness is tied to collapse, and collapse is what makes quantum states definite, then consciousness is not a late addition to an already existing material world. It's part of the process by which the material world becomes definite. The universe doesn't start material and then somehow generate consciousness. It starts as quantum possibility, and the process of becoming definite, the process of collapse, is inherently proto-conscious. Think about the early universe. Right after the Big Bang, everything was quantum. Particles existed in superpositions. The universe was a vast quantum state, and as it evolved, as structures formed and collapses occurred, the universe became increasingly definite. But those collapses, those moments when possibility became actuality, were accompanied by proto-experience. The universe wasn't dead matter, accidentally becoming conscious. It was proto-conscious process, gradually organizing into conscious observers. This resolves the hard problem, because we're not asking how dead matter produces consciousness, we're recognizing that the distinction between matter and consciousness is perspectival. What we call matter is what quantum states look like from the outside when we measure them. What we call consciousness is what collapse looks like from the inside when it's happening in a sufficiently complex orchestrated system. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you're looking at a coin. From one side you see heads. From the other side you see tails. The coin is one thing, but it has two aspects depending on your perspective. Similarly, a brain is one thing, a physical system undergoing orchestrated quantum collapses. From the outside, measured by instruments, it looks like matter, neurons firing, chemicals flowing. From the inside, experienced by the system itself, it's consciousness, thoughts, feelings, sensations. This is neutral monism, a philosophical position that says the fundamental stuff of reality is neither physical nor mental, but something that appears physical when viewed from outside and mental when experienced from within. And quantum mechanics gives us a natural candidate for this neutral stuff. Quantum states undergoing objective reduction, physical when measured, conscious when experienced. Now, I know this is radical. I know it seems to give consciousness a privileged role in physics, and that makes physicists uncomfortable. We're trained to think of physics as objective, independent of observers. But quantum mechanics already violated that ideal. The measurement problem already forced us to acknowledge that observation plays a role. I'm just taking that seriously and asking, what if observation is not some arbitrary operation performed by classical systems, but the intrinsic nature of collapse itself? And this explains something that's always puzzled me. Why does the universe have observers at all? If consciousness is just an accident, an epiphenomenon that does nothing, then why does it exist? Evolution explains why organisms respond to their environments, why they process information, why they behave adaptively, but it doesn't explain why there's an inner experience accompanying those processes. A philosophical zombie, a being with no inner experience, would have the same survival advantage. So why consciousness? But if consciousness is tied to collapse, if proto-experience is part of the process that makes quantum states definite, then observers are not optional. They're necessary for reality to be definite. And that's why the universe produces observers, not by accident, but by necessity. The universe needs consciousness, because consciousness is how quantum possibilities become actualities. This also explains the anthropic principle in a deeper way than the usual multiverse explanations. The anthropic principle says the universe has the properties it does because if it didn't, we wouldn't be here to observe it. That's true but shallow. It doesn't explain why there are observers at all. But if consciousness is necessary for collapse, and collapse is necessary for definite reality, then the existence of observers is not a selection effect. It's a requirement. The universe couldn't exist as anything definite without some form of consciousness. And this connects to my conformal cyclic cosmology. In CCC, the universe goes through infinite aeons. Each aeon begins with a Big Bang and ends in heat death. But the end of one aeon becomes the beginning of the next, through conformal rescaling. Now, if consciousness is tied to collapse, and collapse is what makes states definite, then each aeon is not just a sequence of material events. It's a sequence of experiences. The universe is not a dead mechanism running through predetermined states. It's a conscious process, exploring possibilities, collapsing into actualities, creating structure and meaning. This is not anthropomorphism. I'm not saying the universe has a mind like ours, with thoughts and intentions. I'm saying consciousness is a fundamental feature of physics, present in rudimentary form wherever collapse occurs, and elaborated into complex consciousness in systems like brains. The universe is no more conscious than it is hot or cold. But just as temperature is a real physical property that manifests at every scale, consciousness is a real physical property that manifests wherever collapse occurs. Now let me address objections, because I know there are many. First, this is just mysticism dressed up in physics jargon. No, I'm proposing a testable theory. Orchestrated objective reduction makes specific predictions about quantum coherence in microtubules, about the effects of anesthetics, about the relationship between gravitational self-energy and conscious moments. These are empirical claims. We can test them. Some experiments have already provided suggestive evidence. More are ongoing. This is science, not mysticism. Second objection, consciousness doesn't cause collapse, so it's not doing anything. It's still epiphenomenal. But I'm not saying consciousness causes collapse. I'm saying consciousness is collapse, experienced from within. It's not a separate thing that causes a physical event. It's the intrinsic nature of that event. Just as acceleration isn't something separate from force, it's what force is. From the object's perspective, consciousness isn't separate from collapse. It's what collapses from the system's perspective. Third objection, this doesn't solve the hard problem. You've just moved it to the quantum level. Why should collapse be accompanied by experience? Fair point. I don't have a complete answer, but I've made progress. I've shown that consciousness is tied to a real physical process, objective reduction, not to arbitrary complexity. I've shown that it's fundamental, not emergent. And I've connected it to the measurement problem, showing that consciousness and quantum definiteness are two sides of the same coin. That's not a complete solution, but it's better than saying consciousness is an inexplicable miracle that happens when neurons fire. Fourth objection, evolution explains consciousness. Conscious organisms had survival advantages. But evolution explains why consciousness is useful, not why it exists at all. Natural selection can only act on things that already exist. So where did consciousness come from in the first place? If it's emergent from complexity, we're back to the hard problem. But if it's fundamental, tied to collapse, then it's been present since the quantum universe began. Evolution didn't create consciousness. It created brains capable of orchestrating collapses in ways that produce rich, complex, conscious experiences. Fifth objection, this is unfalsifiable. Proto-consciousness in quantum collapse? How would we ever detect that? But we can detect its consequences. If consciousness is tied to collapse via Orch OR, then disrupting quantum coherence in microtubules should disrupt consciousness. And it does. That's what anesthetics do. They don't just block neurotransmitters. Many of them bind to microtubules and disrupt quantum processes. Turn off the quantum collapse. Turn off consciousness. Turn it back on, consciousness returns. That's testable. That's evidence. And here's the deepest implication. If consciousness came before matter, if proto-consciousness is tied to the process that makes quantum states definite, then mind is not an accident in a material universe. Mind is how the universe knows itself. We are not observers standing outside reality looking in. We are reality becoming conscious of itself. And that's not a late development. It's been happening since the Big Bang. Every collapse, every moment when quantum possibility became actuality was accompanied by a glimmer of experience. And over billions of years, those glimmers organized into stars, planets, brains, and finally into beings like us who can ask, what is consciousness? Where did it come from? Why does it exist? And the answer is, it came with the universe. It's been here all along, not as thought or reflection. Those require brains, but as proto-experience, the intrinsic nature of quantum collapse. Matter is what that looks like from the outside. Consciousness is what it is from the inside. And we are the universe's way of experiencing itself from within. This changes everything. It means science is not the study of dead matter accidentally producing life and mind. Science is the study of a universe that was always proto-conscious, that was always in the process of knowing itself. And we are not separate from that process. We are integral to it. Our consciousness is not a fluke. It's a feature, not designed by a god, not selected by a multiverse, but necessary for reality itself. The materialist story says, first there was matter. Then, after billions of years, matter organized into brains, and somehow, mysteriously, brains produce consciousness. But there's a causal gap. How does matter produce consciousness? No one knows. The idealist story says first there was consciousness, then consciousness dreamed matter into existence. But there's no mechanism. How does consciousness create physics? No one knows. My story, the quantum story, is different. There was never a time when one existed without the other. Quantum states collapsing into definite reality are simultaneously physical, when measured from outside, and conscious when experienced from within. Matter and consciousness are two aspects of one process. Neither came first, they've always been together. This is not comfortable. It violates our intuitions. We're used to thinking of consciousness as rare, special, a property of brains, but quantum collapse is ubiquitous, it's happening everywhere, all the time. Does that mean everything is conscious? No. Most collapses are isolated, uncoordinated, producing only the faintest glimmer of proto-experience, nothing like what we call consciousness. Only in brains, where evolution has created structures capable of orchestrating billions of collapses into coherent patterns, do we get full consciousness. But the seeds were always there. And this suggests something profound. Consciousness might be the universe's way of exploring itself. Each conscious being is a unique perspective, a unique way of collapsing quantum possibilities into experienced actualities. And the universe, through consciousness, is discovering what it can be, not predetermined, not random, but creative, genuinely novel, bringing into existence states that didn't exist until they were experienced. So yes, consciousness came before matter. Not chronologically, there was no time when consciousness existed without physical stuff. But ontologically, fundamentally, consciousness is not a product of matter. It's an aspect of the process by which matter becomes definite. And that means your inner experience, your sense of self, your awareness are not accidents. You are how the universe knows itself. You are as fundamental as space-time, as essential as mass and energy. Consciousness didn't emerge. It was always here, waiting to organize, waiting to reflect, waiting to understand. And now it has. In you, the universe became conscious of itself through the improbable accident of evolution on this small planet. But it was never truly an accident, because a universe capable of producing physics equations that require observers to collapse wave functions is a universe that was always proto-conscious, always on the path to full awareness. Consciousness came first, not in time, but in explanation. It's not something we need to explain in terms of matter. Matter is something we experience. consciousness is what we are, and together they form reality, not matter producing mind, not mind producing matter, but one unified process, appearing different from inside and outside, but ultimately the same. That is the revolution quantum mechanics is trying to tell us. And most physicists haven't been listening. They've been trying to save materialism, trying to avoid consciousness, trying to pretend measurement is just another physical interaction. But it's not. Measurement is where consciousness and matter meet, where the quantum becomes definite, where the universe knows itself. And that's been true since the beginning,